Yo, what up gamers? My name is Russ and today I am bringing you a Soulbind and Conduit guide specifically for Venthyr Demon Hunter, Venthyr Havoc that is. Although some of it is relevant to other covenants, but I do have guides on those other covenants, so you can check out the other videos on my channel if you're interested in my deeper explanations to those. But today we're going to be sticking to Venthyr, more specifically kind of like the meta spec, which is played for most content right now. If you're playing Havoc, you should be familiar with it. It's the Cycle of Hatred spec. So I'm just going to be going over all the different conduits, and then I see a lot of questions and a couple of people get quite confused by third potency conduit and things like that with specific soulbinds. So I'm just going to go into kind of like when you'll take each conduit and why. So before we get going, I'll just quickly shout out my Twitch channel. If you've got any questions, your best point of action is either in the comment section down below or onto my stream. Now, the reason for that, some people DM me questions and things, but please do put it in the comments below, because if I can answer you in the comments, then other people can just read the comments and maybe they have the same question. If people DM me their questions, then I have to answer them 50 times, and I'm only helping one person at a time, right? I can kind of like AoE help everybody if you ask it in the comments or on the stream. Right, so I'll quickly go over the talents that I'm basically going to be referring to with this build. It is the standard Cycle of Hatred Venthyr build. So we're going with Blind Fury, Insatiable Hunger, Unbound Chaos. This row doesn't matter, pick what you want. Cycle of Hatred, again, it doesn't matter, and then Demonic. So if you'd like to see, me talk more specifically about this build, if you're not quite familiar with it, I do have a full Cycle of Hatred guide, which again, I'll link in the description and it'll probably appear on screen somewhere for you now. But we're going to be talking about conduits relative to this build in both Mythic Plus and in raiding. So let me just start by saying that we're basically all builds now are running Nadija, the Mistblade. That is just because her Thrill Seeker ability always works. It just always gives you value, and the same with the Fatal Flaw, which is the second proc you get after the Thrill Seeker expires. Not only are those two abilities pretty solid at either end of the tree, but she also has in the middle of the tree on the right hand side the Dauntless Duelist passive, which I'm essentially going to be treating as kind of like a fourth conduit. So it'll be like either we go Dauntless Duelist or we go for the third potency conduit slot throughout this video. Now, just a word on Theotar and Draven as well. Theotar's okay, however his Soothing Shade ability at the top is you might proc and you have to move out of it. Again, it's giving you mastery as well. It is a lot of mastery, but mastery nonetheless. So not our best stat. We can get much more use out of the haste that Nadija gives us, and also the versatility or something, or crit proc that she'll give us with the Fatal Flaw at the end. Another thing with Theotar is the party favors at the bottom of the tree is also kind of RNG in which tea that we do drink, whether we get haste versus crit or agility main stat. And most people do seem to just like try and see if they get haste tea, and if they don't, then they go to Nadija. But for me personally, and for what I see most people do now, is they just run with Nadija all the time. And a quick word about Draven as well is personally I quite like Draven. It's nice because the main kind of like reason that you take him is this built for war passive, I guess, Soulbind option. Well above 80% health, you gain 1% agility every 2 seconds, stacking up to 5 times, but you lose it if you drop below 50%. Now, I've actually had really good up times with this in keys and in raids, I guess. If you're getting constant healing and you're not dropping too low very often, then I've had like 80% uptime on this, and it's 5% agility, so it is pretty good. But the problem with Draven is kind of like the start of his tree, the Service in Stone. It relies on you dying, and dying is always going to be like a bigger DPS loss than this is ever going to offer you. So it's kind of a nothing if you're playing correctly. And here's like a cool option when you run with the Movers 1. I do like the little red trail that you leave behind you, but practically it seems like we're mostly going for Nadija, just because she's very reliable and she can offer you 3 potency conduits, whereas Draven can't. So for the rest of the video, I'll kind of just be talking about Nadija and her tree and how we can kind of like mix and match that to get what we want. So I'm going to be starting at the very top, that being the top left potency conduit, our very first one. And this one is a complete lock-in no matter what Demon Hunter build you play, especially Havoc, but any build. This is obviously very good for Vengeance too, and that is the conduit Growing Inferno. Now this is going to make our immolation or a deal X amount of extra damage each time that it ticks. So it's not every single time that you cast Immolation Aura, it's doing more and more, like per combat or something. It's like each tick of every individual Immolation Aura. So for me, it's 22% each time. And for me, Immolation Aura ticks 12 times. So, you know, my 12th tick is going to be hitting, I don't know, 240-ish% higher than the first tick. So it's going to give us like ramping up damage, but we just look at it. We don't need to go too much into it. It's just extra damage on Immolation Aura, which is obviously a key button in our rotation. We use Immolation Aura on cooldown, regardless of what we're doing. And essentially it's like our highest damage per second button in the entire kit of a Demon Hunter. On like a single button press, like a single global. It's like our strongest worth global to press. So we're going to be pressing that one on cooldown regardless. And we're always just going to take this free damage that it gives us. So Growing Inferno, use always, 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 always. So going down the tree then, I'm not going to cover endurance and finesse conduits too much. For me personally, I always run with Fell Defender on the endurance conduits and also Viscous Ink. And you can switch out Viscous Ink if you'd like for Condensed Animosphere. Personally, I like the magic damage reduction. A lot of damage that we take, you know, passively as like raid damage does tend to be magic, and that's like the only time I feel like we, you know, are in danger. So it's kind of like a budget avoidance of 12%, whereas this is just a passive healing. And obviously if this is 5% over 10 seconds, then this is just 0.5% of your max health every second. You know, it's free healing, 0.5% healing per second forever, basically, which is obviously like a slow, steady heal. But I prefer being in less danger. Maybe it's artificial and in my head, but I prefer Viscous Ink. And with finesse ones, I go with the move speed after you Feral Rush, and you can really pick whatever you'd like with these. I actually only run with one of them. So we're going to jump down the tree now to actually the bottom, which is the third potency conduit, but the second one that you're always going to have active, and that is Relentless Onslaught. Now this one just has Chaos Strike having an 11% for me at least, and that's at 278, 11% chance to trigger a second Chaos Strike, and this is going to give you all the extra benefits that a Chaos Strike would give you. So you know, if you get a Relentless Onslaught proc and you also get Chaos Strike Refund or a Cycle of Hatred proc, you could get that 2 times off the same Chaos Strike, or maybe even 3. I think this can trigger off itself as well. Obviously the chances get, you know, increasingly smaller and smaller for that to happen. This one is just kind of like baked in extra damage. It doesn't really feel great. I don't really notice it proccing, but I do check my details after dungeons quite often to check, you know, if it's coming out of that you know, 11%. I think it comes out around like 9 to 10 most of the time, but again, it's kind of like and a theme for these potency conduits would be like what's active the most amount of time, like what can we take, you know, what can we take advantage of for the most period of time. So Relentless Onslaught, we're always going to be pressing Chaos Strike, we're always going to be pressing Annihilations, so this is kind of working 100% of the time, and it's something that I'll talk about a bit more when we get to the third potency conduit slot, which is the kind of like one that everyone debates over and argues about. But Relentless Onslaught is a pretty safe lock-in pick, especially when you're playing with this Cycle of Hatred build. Now in other covenants you might switch this one out for, you know, any time that you're playing First Blood, you'll be wanting to run with Dancing with Fate. But for this build, again, we're talking about the Cycle of Hatred meta Venthyr Demon Hunter build. So before I do talk about the third potency conduit slot, I will switch over my, you know, Soulbind tree over to this right hand side here, and we are talking about Dauntless Duelist. Now this one is a pretty good safe pick. It's just free damage and a bit of mitigation. You deal 3% more damage to kind of like your main target. You kind of mark an opponent. You do that by attacking it first. So if you're running into, let's say for example, Lords of Dread, you'll be putting Dauntless Duelist onto the boss that you hit first, and then you need to be making sure that you put most of your damage into your Dauntless Duelist target. You don't want to be, you know, marking Mal'Ganis with Dauntless Duelist and then funneling all your damage into Contessa, right? That wouldn't make sense. So you're kind of marking your main target, and you want to be keeping track of that. And essentially it's just going to be giving you 3% more damage to that target, and you're taking 1.5% less damage from them at all times. So this one is especially great in Mythic Plus, for example, on Tyrannical Keys. I run with this always when I'm playing like high push Tyrannical Keys, because that's really what's going to keep Venthyr doing what it's good at. Any kind of boss damage and stuff, you know, like Venthyr Demon Hunter's not the best at killing trash, it's not the best at AoE, and that's what people are trying to find ways to offset that weakness. It's quite an obvious weakness of Venthyr Demon Hunter. So you might as well just go like double down and go even deeper into what it's good at, and Dauntless Duelist really helps us with that boss damage in the Mythic Plus keys. Obviously, when it comes to raids, you're going to get so much value out of this, so unless you do really need that third potency conduit, I would just say that a good default pick is to just run with Dauntless Duelist, because even on non-tyrannical, you'll still be getting the boss damage from this. It will be proccing onto all, like, one target at least in every single trash pack, so you'll always be getting value from this. And again, I said it's like a common theme with Demon Hunter, Soulbinds, Conduits and stuff, like what you're actually going to get the most value from. And Dauntless Duelist is always going to offer you value on something, but it does kind of like require you to be funneling your damage into one specific target, so you get kind of like locked in and attached to one target. That's fine on bosses, but sometimes on trash packs you'll be needing to focus down something which potentially doesn't have your Dauntless Duelist on it, in which case, you know, you're just kind of sitting there and you're really incentivized to hit that for extra damage, but you kind of just have to leave it be. And those are the kind of scenarios which people tend to want to go away from Dauntless Duelist, maybe on fortified weeks, and pick up this third potency conduit slot. Now, this one is highly in debate, to be honest. Now, you might have spotted that I currently have adaptive armor fragment in that. I'll talk about that in a minute, but what most people tend to run, if you do check on Radar.io, let me just run over to the Forge of Bonds here real quick. If you do check on Radar.io, most people tend to be running with Dancing with Fate in this one. Now, a lot of people don't like this, and a lot of people just do it because, you know, a lot of the top Mythic Plus players are doing this, which is just going to buff up your Blade Dance or Death Sweep every single time that you do a Blade Dance or Death Sweep. Now, I did do a bit of testing on this, and I'd say that it buffs Blade Dance and Death Sweep by about 30 to 40%, you know, just having this conduit. So if you're going to be pressing that button a lot, then it makes sense for it to hit harder, right? The problem is with the Cycle of Hatred build is you generally don't want to press Blade Dance or Death Sweep. In general, you don't want to press Blade Dance ever, like ever, unless you're fighting, I don't know, maybe 20 targets. Even then, I'd say that it's still more worthwhile to get Cycle of Hatred procs by Annihilation or Chaos Strike and cool down I-Beam so that you can I-Beam Fell Devastation more targets. I just don't think it's ever worth pressing a Blade Dance. However, Death Sweep can be worth pressing, especially with this conduit on like 3+ targets, but only when you don't care about your sinful brands. So just think about it like this: every time you're pressing Death Sweep, you are sacrificing a global cooldown that could have been an Annihilation, Fury that could have been an Annihilation, and if that Annihilation had procced a Cycle of Hatred, that can bring back your I-Beam, which will help you extend your sinful brands, but also, you know, you'll be doing more I-Beams. That's more demonic uptime. That's also more, you know, actual damage from the I-Beams and Fell Devastations. So each Chaos Strike or Annihilation is actually doing a little bit more than it just seems. If you look at it in details, you know, the actual damage number from a Chaos Strike or an Annihilation isn't really that high, like per cast, but it's doing a lot of things for you, and that's why this spec is so kind of like topsy-turvy all over the place, because a lot of the power, you know, of your button presses is kind of hidden deeper within the spec. If you want to be super safe and you do take this, then I would just Death Sweep on 5 targets once per I-Beam, and you'll get like decent amount of value out of it. But it's still kind of like up in the air. How much value is that actually worth? You know, is that worth taking off Dauntless Duelist from bosses and trash mobs? I don't know, because most people say they cast Death Sweep maybe 20 casts per dungeon, and like having 40% extra damage on only 20 casts doesn't really feel like a lot. You know, you're only probably taking advantage of 10% of the dungeon or something, right? So it's kind of up in the air, which moves me on to my slightly more edgy pick, which I've been running with quite often now. You might have spotted it earlier in the video, but that is Adaptive Armor Fragment. Now, this one basically is actually a tanking conduit, or it's all tanks, I think, have it, but basically every time you're healed, you will just get a straight agility buff for 15 seconds, and for me at 278, it's 4.4%. This will happen for 15 seconds along the buff, and every 30 seconds from the point at which it procs. So it's 15 seconds up, 15 seconds down, and then when you get healed, 15 seconds up, 15 seconds down. So if you're getting this on cooldown, which most of the time you will be, you know, especially if you're running with, I think most healers have hots and things, so this will be pretty much proccing on cooldown. So I'd say, you know, it should technically give it about 50% uptime, especially in a raid environment. But in dungeons, I've been testing this, and in every single time I've tried it, it's come out between 40 and 45% uptime through all of my combat time in the dungeon, which is quite a lot. So I kind of like just sliced the maths down a bit, and I'd say that that equates to about a 2% agility increase. I might get destroyed by like theory crafters and things here, so just spare me a little bit. But I think it's a kind of cool edgy pick. I've been trying it. I've had decent results with it, to be honest. You're probably safer, and no one's going to tell you off going Dauntless Duelist, but if you want to be a little bit edgy, try out Adaptive Armor Fragment. Tell me what your results are, you know, tell me in the comments and stuff if it worked for you, if you felt like it did a little bit more than Dauntless Duelist. But I would definitely recommend Dauntless Duelist on Tyrannical. But I have been running this on a couple of my Tyrannical keys as well, and, you know, it offsets the trash a little bit. Now moving on to basically the last conduit, which is worth talking about. We won't talk about Serrated Glaive because it's terrible and you never want to throw Glaive, but that is Increased Scrutiny, which is the Venthyr Conduit. Now this one is just going to reduce the cooldown of Sinful Brand by 11 seconds. It's got 45-second base cooldown, so when you socket this one, it goes down to a 34-second one, depending on eye level, obviously. It's just going to give you kind of, I see this one as a bit of a crutch for bad play. There are a couple situations where I could maybe recommend it, but you shouldn't be dropping a Sinful Brand very often, if at all. I don't think that the cooldown being lowered makes Sinful Brand usable, let's say on Mythic Plus, for example. I don't feel like it's a common enough occasion that you can get a second Sinful Brand running on a trash pack before it's dead. You know, if a trash pack is living 34 seconds, you're only, either it's going to die before the second Sinful Brand goes up, or it's going to like get a couple seconds uptime, in which case I don't really think this is worth. I feel like it's a little bit niche. It more just like makes up for potentially if you drop your Sinful Brand on a boss fight or something. You know, there could be bosses in dungeons where you have a bit of downtime. I can think a couple in streets, for example. Like the post boss, sometimes you have to come off the boss to carry the packages. In the menagerie, sometimes you got to run away when she spins around, or move away when the robot is venting out the anima, things like that, where I could see Increased Scrutiny like having a couple uses, because uptime completely kills, you know, uptime on the boss using your demon bites and chaos strikes and things. If you don't get those in, then you're going to struggle with resetting your I-beam, and that's like a trickle-down effect to dropping your Sinful Brand uptime. So this will help with those kind of situations. But if people try to argue, you know, oh, I can get a second Sinful Brand up on trash, I feel like that's only really going to happen like a very few circumstances throughout all of Mythic Plus. In raid bosses, for example, as well, like maybe if you go downstairs on Anduin, you'll lose your Sinful Brand on the boss. You know, stuff like that. But I don't feel like that 10 seconds, 1 or 2 times for an entire encounter is worth dropping Dauntless Duelist for, or dropping, let's say, even Adaptive Armor Fragment for. So I'd say maybe if you're like just learning Venthyr and just struggling a little bit with brand uptime, this one, Increased Scrutiny, could be like a nice little crutch just to get you more used to, you know, more time to practice keeping up the brands, and maybe you'll drop it off and you can put it back up a lot quicker. Feels like you're getting hit in the bollocks less times. So for me personally, what I would recommend is this is always a safe bet, always. This one, if you feel like you want to death sweep a lot, but again, never press Blade Dance, and only death sweep when you feel like your brands are safe, because if you're just constantly spamming death sweep on cooldown, you're going to notice that your brands will start falling off, and that's obviously like most of your damage through the spec, so just be aware of that. And then Adaptive Armor Fragment is kind of like a scuffed Draven passive. It's like a scuffed Built for War. So think about it like that. It's like a scuffed Built for War, except you also get Thrill Seeker and Fatal Flaw. So it's not bad, I'd say, but maybe that's just me coping. Anyway, I hope this helps you guys. I hope if you didn't know, you know, about these conduits and all their different uses, hopefully I've cleaned some stuff up. I realized that this went on quite a lot longer than it probably could have. I'll try and cut out as much as I can in the post process. But hopefully you've walked away from this video a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser, and ready to join me in the Adaptive Armor Fragment cause and stick it to the man, you know? Anyway, guys, if you did enjoy the video, make sure you hit it with a like. If you're still here right now, then you must have really liked it, because I've been talking ages. Feel free to come check out the stream at twitch.tv/JustRuss. Again, that's in the description down below. If you like what I do and you want to, you know, help me doing what I'm doing, then feel free to check out the Patreon as well. That will be linked again down below, and the names will be on screen now for the people that are helping out, you know, in the relevant tier for the names on screen. Other than that, guys, I got some good stuff coming in the near future, both Demon Hunter related and like overall relevant to everybody. So feel free to subscribe for that kind of stuff. And I will see you in the next video. Until then, have a great day. And as always, peace.